Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart, and rather than sitting down at the painting desk this week, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Empire of Man and what their release and the Arcane Journal might bring to the game of Warhammer the Old World.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Baron of Dice, premium wargaming dice. Over 500 styles, over 4,000 customer reviews. Welcome to the best dice on the planet.
Now, I'm excited by the Empire of Man release, and it's probably still a little way off as I'm recording this. We know from the roadmap that it looks to be the first of the armies in 2025, but we know there's nothing coming until 2025 at the earliest. Along with Dwarves, Empire have always been the other army that I always return to the most for my games of Warhammer Fantasy. Over the years, I've spent more time with Empire and Dwarven armies than anything else. Yes, I've collected and painted lots of other things, but it'll always be Dwarves and Empire that I seem to have the biggest collections of, rather than just a focused 2,000 point army for say. I may well have an awful lot more. And I've already been starting on my Null army, and I may expand to other provinces as well. I'm really excited to find out the lore based around the Empire at the time of Warhammer the Old World. It's touched on a little bit in the Arcane Journal for Warriors of Chaos, and it's really got my juices flowing. So I thought it'd be fun to make some predictions. Now, these predictions are based a little bit on what we've seen before, so they're pretty educated guesses. A lot of them are just out there ideas, edging into the wish listing and things I'd like to see. That's not for everyone, this kind of video. People like to wait. I like to get excited and talk about it. So if you're one of those people that wants a nice, fun chat about what we might see, and you want to put your own predictions there and join in the discussion, then this video is for you. If not, then you might not like it, because there's no leaks. There's nothing. I don't have any news here. It's all based on my experience of watching Games Workshop, watching how the other releases have gone, and what has come before, and what clues that might give us to what we might see in the future. So the bulk of this video is going to be based around miniatures and what we might see return. So miniatures and obviously the profiles that go with them. We have a grand army list that matches very closely what was the state of play at the end of 8th edition, minus a couple of things that don't fit in with the current lore. So we don't have any Luminarch, that kind of thing. And those won't be coming back. I can't see it. That would be a bit strange based on what they've said before. So we can have some fun at looking at some old miniatures, wondering if they may return. The Specialist Design Studio who produces the game have had some fun with the previous factions that have already been released. Lots of really old classic miniatures, some made to order, some now made part of the core range, along with re-released plastics and the odd new model here and there. And if we follow that same kind of business model, I think we can go down some of the things that are missing from the past and get a pretty good guess about whether they might return, or at least maybe hope they will do. And the first one I want to start with is Right Guard Foot Knights. That's something we've not seen maybe since sort of 4th, 5th edition times. We used to have metal foot knights, and we've seen foot knights return for Bretonia, and maybe it'll be really cool to see some of these old miniatures coming back. Now, they are quite dated, so I think they'll fall in that camp of not something that's a main profile in the game. Maybe they will be made to order, and it feels like they would fit in nicely, like with some of the dwarf models we've seen, some of those older sculpts that are slightly smaller, that are there available to use, but maybe won't form the core of main armies. But who knows? We'll come to that a little later on when I talk about what my predictions for the Armies of Infamy are going to be in the Arcane Journal. They're very much in the same vein. We used to have famous knightly orders in metal, at least the riders are metal. I think the horses were still plastic, but we had Knights of the White Wolf, Knights Panther, Knights of the Blazing Sun, and even Right Guard Knights as well. And I think they might fit in with some of the new lore. Again, I'll come back to that later on in the video, but I could see them coming back maybe again just as a made to order, with the main plastic kit being the stalwart there that stays in the main range for a long time. Staying in the older, more classic vein, what about something like the War Wagon? I think that would be absolutely fantastic to see back, and one of those things that is a must-have for many people that wish they own it. The prices on eBay are absolutely crazy, and it would fit in the vein with some of the other metal releases we've seen. So I think there's a really good chance of that if the mould and the masters still exist. I think the guys have spent quite a lot of time bringing back these old miniatures and reading between the lines and conversations and things. Some things they'd have liked to have brought back just haven't been possible because the masters have gone or the master mould has gone. But I think if this was in a state they can bring it back, I can't see why they wouldn't. It's pretty much printing money. People would love to have it, and I think it would fit in perfectly as an Arcane Journal unit entry. A little bit later on, but in a similar vein, we used to have some fantastic upgrade options to the plastic steam tank kit. So we had the Sigmar hammers upgrade and then the Von Zeppel as well. Again, if those molds still exist, what a perfect thing that you could sell as an add-on and a way of bringing more units or upgrades in the Arcane Journal. I think they would sell really, really well. People love them. So if those molds exist and they are able to cast them in metal again, I think they would be fantastic to see. I would absolutely love them. And what about Teutocan Guard? For those fans of Ulrich, we've already seen a Priest of Ulrich profile alongside a Priest of Sigmar, so there's clearly a bit of a theme building there. So in that sense, I'd almost be surprised if they weren't brought back, especially if the miniatures have survived and they're able to do so. So I think there'll be people that want to build very Ulrich themed armies. That's part of the new lore now. You can see it in the Warhammer core rulebook, so the lore, it is mentioned there. So I would be surprised in many ways if they don't come back, and I think they would be super popular as well. And what about some slightly shorter, stout fellows? The Warhammer The Old World interactive map very clearly has the moot on there, and I think from memory it's clickable as well, at least the heraldry is, with that little bit of information. That tells me that they're planning to do something with it. I'll be surprised if it's an awful lot with it. I don't think we're going to see a whole halfling army, as cool as that would be, but I think they'll do something with it. Back in 4th edition, halflings were in the army book. You could take Imperial halflings, you could take the hot pot, and I think there's a really good chance that we'll see both of those, and I think there's a good chance there might be more than made to order, and they'll have profiles in that Arcane Journal. That's a guess from me. I think that's how they will cover them off, put them back in the place they were before. I think there's also a chance that we'll see the old Dogs of War favourites, Lumping Coops Fighting Cocks, come back. The lore won't match there, so he wouldn't be able to be that character unit, but maybe we'll see them as a return to the range as a made to order, just to use as halflings with bows. It would be cool. I've got some, and they'll be in a video very soon, and I'll be using mine as Empire Huntsmen anyway, regardless of whether or not they get a profile. So if they don't get a profile, I'll still find a way to get them in my army, just because they're really fun and cool to use. Could we see other Dogs of War as well? I think it's possible. Both Estalia and Talia have double pages inside the main rulebook lore, not just a paragraph here or there. I do feel that there's so much that they could bring back from this army, and only 2 Armies of Infamy and the number of units to go in there. I did wonder whether it would be a bit too much. I don't think they will, but it might be possible to see those in the future, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind. Of course, there is more and some really beloved stuff from the Forge World side of the business through the release of Tamokan. And obviously, the Forge World side of the business is now a Specialist Design Studio, and that's where Warhammer The Old World comes. So I think they hopefully have some access to some of these miniatures. Most famously, the Landship. I've built and painted one this year, and it is tricky, and I wouldn't be surprised if that mould no longer existed. I imagine it would be hard to produce and take a lot of work for them to remake in the way that they could produce it en masse, but it'd be amazing to see it back, and I'm sure it would sell absolutely bucket loads. But perhaps more importantly, a lot of those miniatures link very closely with the current lore and the focus. If you've read the Arcane Journal for Warriors of Chaos and looked at the lore there, and I'll pop a little link in for my own lore video based on that, we are talking about the Wasteland, which became Westerland. We're talking about Marienburg, and that part of the Old World features quite heavily. And in that lore, they talk about landships, they talk about the link to Nuln, but they talk about Manan's blades as well, which is another prediction of mine, that if those molds exist, they will come back. They are named in the lore in the Arcane Journal for Warriors of Chaos, so I think we will see them again. If you look at the studio army in the Empire pictures or recent publications, it is the blue and yellow, which looks a little bit of a mix of Marienburg stroke Nordland stroke what Westerland may have been at that time as well. So I think they're leaning heavily into that, so it's a good chance we would see Manan's blades. There's also other links as well to Nuln, so we have the Ironsides, the Nuln Ironsides, the handgunners, they would be really, really cool to see. Theodore Butnor was a special character that doesn't fit into this timeline, but maybe he could be brought back as a special character or just a standard general or grandmaster if they wanted to, and they have done that with some other older miniatures, but maybe he's a little bit less likely. But some amazing things there just from that Empire range. A lot of those things were upgrade kits as well, so if they can produce them, I think we'll see them, and they match the lore, which is the most important thing. The lore is a real clue to the direction they're going. And the final prediction is maybe not so much of a miniature, but I think there's a chance of a profile being added, is maybe a dragon. I don't know if they're going to produce a new dragon, but in the past the Empire were able to take dragons. There's only one great Imperial dragon at the Imperial Zoo as far as I'm aware, but in the past you were able to take different sized dragons and things. So lore obviously changes and is flexible over time. Some people really don't like that. Some people just see it as part of the way these games work and are written, but I think it would be really cool if that option was brought back into the army list. Many of you will no doubt be shouting, we don't need more dragons and more of that arms race of only armies with dragons doing well. I kind of get that as well, and maybe it would be a little bit problematic. From a fun thematic point of view, it would be amazing if a certain Arcane Journal themed Army of Infamy maybe could draw on the one Imperial dragon, even if it's just an option there to take with a profile without a miniature. I think it would be pretty cool. Now, as for the Arcane Journal armies, the two themed armies we will find in that book, it's a little bit harder to predict. There's so many different ways they can go. And there are four main pretenders in the old world at this time, so it makes it a little bit harder to split and predict. But we have the Barony of Westerland, we have the Grand County of Ostland, we have the Principality of Reichland, and the Grand Duchy of Talabek. Now that's obviously really hard to make four out of, and I'm not sure you'd need to make four out of if you were being inspired by those. Based on the one paragraph description, I think the Grand Duchy of Talabek could be serviced very well by the standard army list, with maybe the addition of the odd character here or there that you may be able to use. So I don't think that needs to become an Army of Infamy. Same also goes for the Grand County of Osterland as well. I think that could probably be serviced by the main army list, especially with the addition of the odd unit here or there, the odd themed unit like the Ulrich stuff we've already seen. Obviously it covers a lot more than just those provinces, but because they're grouped into these larger areas at this point, because of the way the politics of the Empire were, again, I don't think an Army of Infamy is needed. It could be done, but if we're sticking to the rule that there's two in each book, I'm not sure we'll see it. Now they could just go down a simple engineer stroke cannony gunline kind of route, and that covers Reichland for the engineers and the gunnery from Nuln quite a lot, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think they will lean into the lore a little bit. We've seen it with Wolves of the Sea for Warriors of Chaos. So we have the Barony of Westerland, which is the focus of the lore in that Warriors of Chaos book, and they talk about the cult of Manan, and I've already talked about Manan's blades, and I think we could see an army based around the defense of the north and those incursions that we've seen with the Warriors of Chaos, and that would just link perfectly with what's in that Warriors of Chaos book and what it appears is in that studio army and the paint schemes they've chosen. So I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't an Army of Infamy based around themes to do with that. And I think for the second one, we might see something either linked to the Principality of Reichland, or more likely just around sort of knightly orders and being devout and worshipful to either Sigmar or Ulrich, which spreads that out a little bit more, which means you can have an Ulrich themed thing as well. So maybe you'll see flagellants as core, maybe we'll see more knightly orders based in the core as well, so you can have whole mounted armies or knights and worshippers. And if you look at the lore in the current rule book, it talks about Reichland being all devout and not being a big fan of Talabek land, which is a little bit more laid back and loose, and that kind of matches as well. So I think that's pretty cool, and it will give you two quite different themed armies, one very current lore, so the cult of Manan, and the current lore with the Warriors of Chaos, which really fits in with that, and one a bit more generic, but it allows you to have that kind of knightly order, devout priests kind of army. I think that would be really cool as well. I think they could do with a bit of a boost. I'd really love to hear what you think. Those Armies of Infamy are so hard to predict. I think they're pretty good ideas of how it might go, but there are clearly so many other options out there, and it may well surprise us. And most of us were wrong when we predicted a Slayer Army of Infamy for the Dwarves, and it went in a slightly different way. So I'm sure there will be surprises there, but I'd be happy with those options. They would seem to work. I would love a way of making core infantry a little bit more viable. You see most Empire armies at the moment, when people want to make them slightly competitive, there's less and less foot troops because they're just not as good in the meta. Not everyone plays that way as well, so for friendly games and narrative games, that's not so much of a problem. I quite like when the competitive games and the narrative games, the armies aren't so wildly different and the game can work quite well, so that Warhammer still looks like Warhammer on the table regardless of the way you're playing the game. So it'll be interesting to see if there are ways to boost infantry in this book, which maybe changes the meta a little bit. That would be interesting. I'd love to hear your ideas of what you think could be done with infantry as well to make them better. Not quite what the full topic of this video, but I know it has been talked about recently, and now I'm writing lists for Empire and wanting to put lots of infantry in there, but always finding that balance of this just isn't going to win a game against what's out there a lot of the moment. Bit of a side quest, that sort of topic, but I'm sure we'll get some comments on that as well. I really love to hear your thoughts on the miniatures list I presented as well. I think they're all possibilities that have some reasoning behind them, would be logical in one way or another. I've left off a lot of the special character miniatures because I just don't think we'll see them back because of the timeline. But there's probably things I've forgotten as well. So please do comment below and let me know what I've missed or just what you'd really like to see back. And for those of you who are still watching this far and like to support the channel, please do check out the video description. There's links to all my affiliates there, and also a link to my Patreon, which is the best way that you can help support me making these videos and keep the channel going. I've launched a monthly giveaway to patrons as well. So if you're a member, you get entered in the hat, and it's different prizes each month. And if you're watching in October, it's a Bolt Action Core version 3 book. It will be different each month going forward. And as long as you're still a patron member, your name will be entered into the hat there for that. So please do check them out. Coming up, lots more old world content very soon. Back to the painting videos next time round as well. And maybe, if I get it done in time, maybe some very short, stout fellows, which will be really, really fun to do. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.